I hate when people say Jujutsu Kaisen has no story. Yeah, it doesn't have one if you're watching the show with your eyes closed and your brain turned off. The story covers many important themes, but there's a couple that stand out the most. The first being purpose and self-identity. Throughout Jujutsu Kaisen, the idea of finding purpose and self-identity is a recurring theme. The question of what it means to be a Jujutsu sorcerer and why being one is important is discussed by many characters. On the surface, Jujutsu sorcerers exist simply to exercise curses. However, the most interesting thing is that pretty much everyone has their own personal reason for being a Jujutsu sorcerer, and the funny thing about it is there's no inherently right answer. Similar to real life and how there is no objectively right way to live your life, there's no objectively right answer as to why someone should be a Jujutsu sorcerer. Yuji is a sorcerer because he has a goal which no one else can accomplish, which is being the vessel for Ryoma and Sukuna. Megumi is a sorcerer because he wants to save good people from the unfairness of life. Even side characters like Maki have a compelling reason for being a Jujutsu sorcerer. Purpose is what motivates the Jujutsu sorcerers more than anything. Even some non-sorcerers like my boy Toji have a distinct purpose that's highlighted in the show. The story of Jujutsu Kaisen emphasizes the importance of knowing your purpose and how it relates to your self-identity. When Yuji tells Principal Yaga that he wants to be a Jujutsu sorcerer because his grandfather told him to help people, he says that's not good enough. He asks Yuji if he's only becoming a Jujutsu sorcerer because of his grandfather's will. He asks him if that's the case, then when he dies, will it be his grandfather's fault? This scene is Yaga trying to help Yuji find a purpose for being a sorcerer that's not external and relates with his self-identity. While this little teddy bear is beating Yuji's ass, he explains that this is important for sorcerers because becoming a Jujutsu sorcerer is an unpleasant job that requires insane amounts of motivation. We see exactly what he means in Shibuya, as this is Yuji's first major mission and it makes him almost give up on being a sorcerer twice. Similarly, in the Hidden Inventory arc, we see how Geto's strong sense of purpose and self-identity being challenged ultimately led to him giving up Jujutsu sorcery and turning racist. Geto was a sorcerer for the purpose of protecting the weak, but as he began to question his self-identity, he ultimately snapped and went down the wrong path. I'll link this video in the end if you want to see me go more in depth into Geto's character. Like I mentioned earlier though, Maki is another character with a compelling purpose for being a sorcerer. From birth, she was ridiculed being born into one of the big three sorcerer clans without a respectable amount of cursed energy. Unlike Toji, who was born with absolutely no cursed energy, which ultimately strengthened his heavenly restriction, granting him physical prowess comparable to sorcerers, this was not the case for Maki. Maki and her twin sister Maya were both born with negligible amounts of cursed energy, which reduced the effect of their heavenly restriction. Because of this, their place in the Zenin household was basically just being maids, and they were constantly mistreated by the entire Zenin family. Deciding to ultimately leave, she wanted to become a strong sorcerer to spite her family, and oh boy does she succeed, but I'll save that for another video. Ultimately, Gege is teaching us as the audience the importance of purpose and how it connects to our self-identity. Through Yuji and many others, he shows why it's important to have a solidified purpose, as it keeps you motivated through tough times, and through Geto, he shows how purpose can be detrimental if left up to interpretation. Another important concept the story of Jujutsu Kaisen tackles is the idea of good and evil and how morality is linked to Jujutsu sorcery. This is why Yuji is such an interesting main character. His strong sense of justice and righteousness is constantly challenged by Sukuna, who is sharing his body. Sukuna, being a curse who thrives off negativity and wickedness, forces Yuji to question the value of his own life. He wants to be alive to do good and help people, but him being alive means there's a chance Sukuna can kill innocent people. Imagine trying to do good in the world, but no matter how many steps you take forward, your work is erased and it's all by your own hands. This is why Yuji feels responsible even though he's not consciously committing these actions. This inner search for meaning of good and evil is shared through so many characters in the story. Megumi is another character who struggles to find balance between good and evil and his own morality when it comes to being a sorcerer. For starters, it's important to go over his reason for being a Jujutsu sorcerer in the first place. In his first fight with Sukuna, he says watching his sister, who was the kindest person he knew, be cursed made no sense to him. He also thought about how his father, who didn't even know his gender, gave him the name Megumi, which is a female name and is still out there somewhere.
Stop the cap.
Megumi came to realize that life is fundamentally unfair. Karma doesn't happen on its own, and because of that, he decided to make it his mission to save people whether it was fair or not. He wanted good people to receive the blessings they deserve regardless of the inherent unfairness of life. Being face to face with Sukuna, who had taken over Yuji's body, Megumi feels responsible. Instead of killing Yuji earlier, he let him live because he knew he was a good person inside. He says he didn't save him because it was the logical thing to do, but because he didn't want to see a good person, no matter how dangerous, die. This is why I love this panel where he says, "I'm not a hero, I'm a Jujutsu sorcerer." He chose his own morality over the concept of heroism. He doesn't regret making the selfish decision to save Yuji despite him being a vessel for Sukuna. Being a Jujutsu sorcerer is bigger than being good or evil. Sometimes saving people requires you to be selfish, which is something Megumi had to learn. We get a glimpse of a training session he had with Gojo where he explains this to him. Gojo tells Megumi his potential is higher than even Yuji's, however it's his mentality that's holding him back. He explains that while it's noble that he's willing to sacrifice himself for others, it's also detrimental to his potential. He uses the Kyoto baseball event game as a reference to when Megumi put his teammates ahead by playing it safe with the sacrifice bunt. Gojo explains that baseball is a team sport where everyone is expected to play their own roles, but being a Jujutsu sorcerer is an individual sport. As a Jujutsu sorcerer, no matter how many allies you have, you die alone. Megumi's idea of being a good sorcerer meant even if he had to suffer in order to help others, he would do so without hesitation. Gojo ends by telling him winning by dying and winning even if you die are two completely different things. Megumi's secret trump card, Maharaga, could pretty much get his comrades out of whatever tough spot they were in. However, the trade-off would be Megumi's death. In his eyes, this was the easy choice because he wanted to save others unselfishly, which is why he was always ready to summon him at the slightest inconvenience. Ultimately, purpose and morality are two central themes in Jujutsu Kaisen that can't be ignored. While usually the action does take the forefront, if you peel back the layers, Jujutsu Kaisen gives you real life lessons, which is why if you still think there's no story, then there's only one option.
Take him to Detroit. No! No, not Detroit! No! No, please! Anything but that! No!